a Cajun boy. There's a Cajun boy. I learned to stoop my mouth before I had my teeth. I love Ovaltine, that's my cup of tea. I would cut your throat over dominoes. Love to see sap jams wearing pantyhose.
So why in the 8 books, why this one you thought to revise?
Well, this one has been the best selling, and also in terms of publication, more widely used around the Caribbean, because I've worked in school districts in the Eastern Caribbean, in Grenada, in Antigua, in St. Kitts and Nevis, and the ministries of education have used it in the schools, and that's what I thought it would be good to revise it in light of some of the things that are happening in the society, the increase of violence and challenges and so on. So to make it more available to students and teachers and school districts.
What are some of the key things you think in the book kind of help with aggression and anger?
Self-belief, respect, and building self-awareness of oneself, and these are some of the tools. Sometimes there is a lot of reaction to name calling, to how persons feel persons see them or speak to them. And so when you have confidence in yourself, when you're aware of who you are, you don't have to wait on persons to tell you who you are. And therefore, when some person call you a name or suggest that you are this type of person, you don't have to accept that because you are aware of who you are. So you try to build the confidence in persons, and so that they don't just become a reactionary person. And a lot of reactionary stuff and impulsive behavior leads to anger and violence and acting out behavior.
So is this something that you developed through time, or were you always kind of peaceful and not so impulsive? Because some people are predisposed kind of to like quick-tempered, and some people are slow to boil. What type of person were you as a boy?
Well, I've always been quite calm and balanced, I will say, and sports enthusiast, and even when my peers would get into fights and so on, you try to be a peacemaker at school and on the football field, on the cricket field. You try as best as you can to be a peacemaker. And I always gravitated to situations that will help to uplift rather than diminish. And so those are, in terms of who I am. I remember growing up, they would say at home, a coward dog keeps whole bones, and
Coward dog
keeps whole bones. In other words, if you're not fighting all the time, you wouldn't get bite up, and you wouldn't get your bones broken up. So
Okay.
So I was never I was never a fighter.
You've never been in a fight?
I have been in a fight at school. It didn't last very long.
It got broken up, or
Yes.
it got finished?
I think we were just reacting to boys around us and so on.
Yeah.
And I remember the person, he became a very good friend of mine after.
That happens.
But I did do a little boxing when I was young, probably between 11 and 12. Some bigger boys in the community put some gloves on your hand, and the current leader of the opposition in Barbados, his brother and I, Glenn, were boxing, and he was encouraging us, and the other big boys were encouraging us. So we did it for a couple of rounds, and then after that I said, boxing is not for me.
But it's interesting you say that, especially with these sports, because in my research, because I was trying to find what are the Caribbean male rites of passage, and what I found, one of the major things that assist boys in boundaries and aggression and anger was sports. In terms of there's a referee there are parameters, and especially martial arts. It teaches you to take a hit and not get upset. Because boxing is one of those ones that it's hard to not let your emotions go with you. So it's interesting you speak of that 11, 12, but yet you still left it. So you can't really give it too much credit. You can't really credit box into the peacefulness.
No, 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 not when you get a couple of knocks on your head. You remember that it is like drinking. I grew up with persons drinking around me, and when I was younger at that time. I was probably about 9 or 10, and my older brother. He went by the neighbor one Christmas, and the neighbor gave him some drinks because that was. It said, "You're a man if you can hold your drink." And when he came back. He tried to give me two, and I refused because I didn't like this bitter stuff that I had to drink, and I saw people putting up their face and screwing up their face and so on to drink this stuff. I said that doesn't make sense. But he came home after being a man and taking the drinks, and he's vomiting all over the place. And I said, no, that drinking business is not for me. I had family members who drank, and in the house there, I used to go and buy the alcohol for them when they send me to the shop, but. They would offer me all the time, but I like to read, and I would get away from them by saying I have to read. And,
wow, what an excuse.
Yes.
So there wasn't teasing? If you say, I can imagine boys,
Yeah,
that's not a good excuse for boys.
Well, the fact is that when they start to drink and they start to talk, then you have to tell them about what you're reading about. And so therefore they're always questioning you about school and not questioning you about what you read, and the poetry they always remembered some poem or something, and if you didn't know it, they will say you're not going to do very well, you know. But so you grew up with that, but alcohol was not, but then later in life I met a friend of mine who was a doctor, medical doctor, and he encouraged me to have a little wine sometimes. My sometimes is probably about 4 times a year. But alcohol, I guess from what I saw in growing up, alcohol was not a big part of my life. Yes.
So that raises an interesting point. How I boiled down mine was my research. I distill it to protect like the rights or the ways that men, when I talked to a lot of men in Jamaica and Barbados, the ways they knew they were a man, I boil it down to protect, provide, and prove. And prove is a big underlying thing. So I'm curious, it seemed like you didn't have this like innate need to prove manhood. Almost. It's interesting that you took that route because a lot of people, they say boys do a lot of risk taking. Some of it is innate and biological, but a lot of it is to show others.
Well, I believe in risk taking, but I do it from the perspective of things that I can do by myself. I don't have to have other people, like driving, for instance. I like to drive, and I've driven quite a lot, especially in the United States, hours and hours, 15, 20 hours. I actually drove for 20 hours one time.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but 10 hours, 8 and 10 hours, okay. But then I will go to places, try to discover new places, and get lost. I didn't never mind getting lost. So that was a risk that you're willing to take. So I take risks that will not encumber other people, but they're okay for me in terms of discovery. So the risks have to be about discovery and development and knowledge. That's my idea of effective risk taking. My primary school principal, Mr. Jones, who pulled me out and saw something in me in terms of given some extra lessons, and that helped me in terms of moving to secondary school. And my primary school teacher as well, Miss Haywood, and who started me reading, and I was able to. The library was just a book press, and I think I read all the books in the library. It just was a little book press, but Gulliver's Travels and all of those books are early at an early age. And then in my late teens, my pastor, Reverend Gooby, he was an Englishman. His grandfather was a minister, and became a minister. Now his son is a minister as well, and they're Englishmen, and they are but they served in the Caribbean. And we got as a group of young men, we got connected with them in our late teens, and we would spend a lot of time connecting and talking with each other, and that was helpful in terms of helping in terms of growth and direction, And as I said, my youth connecting with we had a group, two groups. One was a mixed group of males and females at the church, and then we had a young men group. So we would meet differently, and I headed that group for a while, and then keeping the boys together and seeing what we can do in the community and helping the older people and so on. So those are aspects of that I would like. I remember fondly.
So do you struggle with any anger or any of these things that you speak on?
No, my main challenge will be patience. Being. I think I'm often more patient try to be more patient with people than I often am with myself. So that has always been my challenge in terms of patience, and sometimes getting things done. Like when I go on when I'm appointed to a committee, or I always see in terms of the potential in terms of what can be done, and it gets to me sometimes when I see people just dilly-dallying and not doing what we ought to do. So that gets to me. That's one of my challenges in terms of patience, because I like to get things done, and I like to, I don't like to be, and so therefore I am a little bit of a workaholic. So I'd like to move on to finish something and move on to the next task, and that is important for me.
So then frustration start to build.
Yes, when you're not able to. So you like to set targets and work towards them.
So do you have conscious things you do to kind of dispel or that kind of frustration? Because I know for me, I think one of the best things you do that a lot of people could take is just walking in the morning.
Yeah, I have to walk. That's important, and I like to walk by myself because it is. I really feel more energized, and I'm able to think easier. And driving is very important as well, and that's getting away from it all. And just being. I think I've written most of my my books when I've been away. Going to do a seminar in an island, and during the day you're working, doing a seminar. At night now you're by yourself, and so I don't ever stay with people because they will want to engage you in talking and so on. I will go by my friends, and I know I'm not doing any writing there, so then you spend that time. So being by myself and having the time to talk and to walk the room, that is important as well. You have to find your space and your time, what works for you, and therefore space is important. I like, and I say to persons, even Jesus would take himself away from his disciples time and again for that quiet time and space, and you have to build your own time and space so that you can look at and you can reflect. That has helped me in terms of working in a counseling center in Connecticut and working in a hospital in Pennsylvania, as I trained to be a chaplain. So it gave you time. There's always time to do stuff, but you have to make time for reflection. And reflection allows you to do that. It has to do with the culture, how you're socialized. In our Caribbean reality, men are socialized differently than women, girls and boys, and so therefore the pressure that is brought to bear on them. Like for instance, they say in Jamaica, for instance, the average young man becomes sexually active at 15, and the girl becomes sexually active at 17. And I was in a class just 2 nights ago and asking my students, why does a boy get to that point? What influence? And they came to the realization that the influence of peers. And so therefore, if you are able to have peers who look out, not just following what everybody else is doing, but seeing a bigger picture in terms of how they're going to develop themselves and how they're going to grow. Sometimes the young boy needs that so that he can develop himself, and sometimes, unfortunately, those developmental lessons are not there because the peers that are bent in going in one direction. But it is important that you're having persons around you. And so that's why I've always it's always been helpful to me to look to older people because they have been instrumental in my overall guidance as well.
Yeah.
Boys are taught at a very early age to swallow the emotions. And when you learn and you continue to swallow your emotions, after a while, it comes out in angered responses, and then the anger can turn into rage, and there's where you can fight or you can behave. If you have a weapon, you can use the weapon and so on, because they're not allowed and taught that nobody wants to validate your emotions in terms of allowing you to express the emotions however you want to express those emotions in terms of tears and so on. And now we find now, I've been saying in seminars now, there's some researchers that have helped us to see that expression of tears is healthy and helpful, irrespective of who we are, male or female. And but it is a cultural issue, and you're not a man. If you're crying when you're a boy, you're seen as girly and stuff. So until we begin deal with some of those issues in the culture, where persons are not told to eat the emotions and so on, then unless you can do that. But I learned at a very early age to be able to express it because of a very traumatic situation with a family member who was killed in a violent way. And it came out, and I was able to be comfortable in terms of being able to do that.
How do you solve all of these societal issues? Do you ever feel like it's just too much? Like you can't bother like...
Well, I know there are persons out there who are doing their best, and I've taken some of my students through restorative justice programs and training. There's centers here in Jamaica, more so than the rest of the Caribbean. It has not taken off in a big way because I think culturally people push back against it in terms of forgiving somebody who killed my brother or forgiving somebody who, it's much more than that, but that's how some people interpret it. But so it is work that we have to do on the ground. And this is what I try to say to my students. We have to be on the ground alongside persons. And that's the only way you're going to change things. We can't do it from afar. And so therefore, here's where the risk are. You have to take those risks. And if we're going to make any difference, we have to really be willing to take those risks and continue training, continue to help, and continue, and don't assume, but continue to give what you're able to give, and that's what's going to make the difference. And you can't despair. You always have to be hopeful. Yeah,
that's important. So if you were prime minister for a year, and you could I know you can say no to it, but I'm just wondering how would you? Is there a way that there could be more funding in a direction, more focus in a direction? Are there any practical things if you had this kind of autonomous power?
Well, I wouldn't. That's not something that I would want to do.
I know. I understand hypothetically.
But I would say in terms of develop, like I said to the long time ago, to the ministry, the Eastern Caribbean Ministries of Education in Eastern Caribbean, we need to put more social workers in schools, and I think that is a way that we can go in terms of interacting with our students and understanding their situations when they come to school, what they're battling with, what they're wrestling with, what the issues that they're dealing with. Until you can get a grasp of that, you're going to continue to punish them for stuff that is beyond their control, and just assume because you were given. And the challenge that we have is that we don't have communities that help to raise children anymore. And so those those parents who are out there struggling to make ends meet, put food on the table, they still have to help the child to grow, and it is very hard on them. And therefore, if you can help the child by having persons who can visit in the home and can connect the family and the teacher and the child so that people can understand what are the issues, what are the real issues, I think you can do a much better job.
The work continues.
Yes.
Always have hope. Always have hope. So thank you.
You're welcome.